This meeting is being recorded.
Bit of business we need to transact, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to take the privilege of the chair to make one move on our agenda. I'm going to jump to item 5, Neighborhood Services Update, and allow Ms. Senzi to be first on the agenda for a change. In my last official meeting as chair, I caught her off guard. Uh-oh. I always give her a hard time. We get to the end of the meeting, we're all sitting here rushing to get out, so. Gonna let her have first, well, almost first on the agenda. We can go ahead and do, I don't know that we need to do any introduction. We'll go ahead and do a little business while you're setting up, get the minutes approved. But so moved on the minutes.
Yeah, so moved.
I'll second that.
All right, got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, I caught staff totally off guard. All right, let's
One
go to
order of
business.
business, real
Sure.
quick, but I just wanted to make an announcement that this will be Brenda's last meeting also. She's retiring and that's why we have Angie here to kind of start taking on these, minutes and learning how this, meeting flows. So just wanted to make a comment. She's 38-year employee of the city.
Yeah, she started working here when she was 2.
So anyway, just want to make that announcement. We'll have a little cake and punch for her next week, one day. Monday, yeah.
I don't know what the deal is. We never get to vote on this stuff. It's retired. Congratulations. Okay. We're ready to go. Item 5.1, Neighborhood Services Grant Updates. And you have a report in your packet.
Thank you. I'm just going to go as every month. I'm going to run through the grants that we have received to date and where they're at in next steps. The first one up is the Economic Development Administration grant, the EDA-DR for MSP infrastructure. We have a smaller, as you know, we let go of exclusive rights with our existing developer. So one of the things that we're working on is working with the state of Missouri for the One Health Lab, as well as the Primary Care Association, to see if we can transfer those job beneficiary creations over to those entities. That way we can still fulfill the terms of the EDA grant. We are still in the middle of our environmental review process, which includes a programmatic agreement with the State Historic Preservation Office and EDA and potentially the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. We have a draft that we're working out, and so far the stipulations of that draft, meaning in exchange for us demoing some of the structures at MSP, we have to do something to mitigate it because it's eligible for the National Register. And that's something that happens anytime that you bring federal funds to the site. So some of the concepts that we've committed to in the draft are the National Register nomination for the Missouri State Penitentiary, archaeological monitoring before and after demolition. So anytime that we take down one of the structures before we, seed and straw, we would allow archaeologists to go in there to see if there's any subsurface deposits. Design review process through our PUD process. All of MSP, as far as zoning goes, is a PUD. We'd have to build in a layer of architectural review in line with Secretary of Interior standards based on the existing draft. We will send out the draft for public comment. There will also be a public meeting of some sort as a requirement of the programmatic agreement, and also just as an opportunity to let the community know what our intentions are with the site. There will also be, once our job beneficiaries issue gets ironed out, as well as this programmatic agreement, we'll have a better concept of what our timelines are. And at that time, a formal grant amendment will likely come to council just to update the timelines on that opportunity. The next update that we have is with our entitlement Our community development block grant, that's the roughly $300,000 that we get every year through our entitlement status. We kind of have dual processes going on, so it's very easy to get confused or get them intertwined. We are in year 5 of our 5-year consolidated plan. So we have a 2023 annual action plan that will be due in August. We are also working on our next 5-year consolidated plan, which would cover years from 2024 to 2029. We did have a public meeting to determine what those activities for that next 5-year plan would be. And it came across as housing, but housing across the continuum. So they wanted to keep demolition, they wanted to keep down payment assistance, but also addressing maybe some public service needs within for homeless service providers. But essentially it came back as housing across the continuum. So we're going to take those comments along with our existing planning documents, our CDBG disaster recovery funds, which we'll talk about next, and kind of make sure that we're trying to touch on everything that's housing in areas that we think we need to fill a gap. The consolidated plan is due in November of this year. Community development block grant disaster recovery. So this is the tornado money. $7.3 million. We are working on trying to still figure out our multifamily approach. One of the things that we want to request of the state is to raise the cap for multifamily rehab. The buckets have up to $5 million for new construction and up to $1 million for rehab. I think if we maybe rose that cap a little bit on rehab, we have a lot of existing multifamily structures that were impacted by the tornado. It could be an approach to both getting a new construction facility or new construction multifamily apartment building, as well as repairing some of the existing ones that we have. But that's dependent on if the state would be willing to raise that cap. Also still trying to strategize with layering with MHDC funding. Their qualified allocation plan should come out any time now. It usually comes out in April. So we're waiting to see what that plan says. That way we can layer our funding opportunity with that one as well. One of the activities that we have open is a planning activity. We have budgeted $250,000. And we could do any sort of planning activity that would help our community overcome the tornado or any of the issues that were created by the tornado. One of the things that was also outlined in our housing needs assessment was to do a zoning code review to see if we needed to streamline efforts to make housing development a little bit more simplified within our own processes. Take a peek at self-reflect on ourselves. We could also do updates to our hazard mitigation plan. And then there's also other opportunities that we could tap into, issues such as stormwater, fire, police, or even partnering with the county on a planning activity. Yes. Yes. So again, the disaster recovery funds, and if you can click on your links. I won't have Grant do it now, but it'll take you to our site and you can see all of the activities that are open. We opened every activity that we possibly could, and then budget we can move between categories if necessary.
So in the housing study, there were a number of recommendations and approaches to improving housing. Is that what this study and planning would look at taking?
So this would take it to that next step. So in the housing study, it identified you should take a look at your zoning code. There's this, and this that could potentially be improved. This next step would be hiring a consultant to provide recommendations on what the zoning code should say.
Okay, and I know it had in there about land bank and other activities. Planning could take into looking at some of those other aspects of.
Sure, and there is, I would say the looking at the zoning code is probably the only thing that the city could do solely by itself. All the other activities that were identified in the housing study really require a partnership, because I think some of those, like your land banking, that that type of activity, you really need to have a partnership with somebody else, a third-party community entity. And we can work on developing those relationships as well.
Right, but I just want to make very clear that, so when it says other stormwater, fire, police, county, these are planning projects that involve stormwater, planning for
Yes.
fire, planning for police, planning active.
Correct.
Just want to make that very clear. This isn't money that we can just put into storm pipes and start digging. These are planning activities. So I had trouble with that one. So I just want to make sure no one else is having similar trouble.
Okay. We also have our Paul Brune Historic Preservation Fund Revitalization Grant. We are working with 6 different property owners. We've got 2 properties that are side by side on Madison Street. Well, 3 on High Street and then 1 on Dunklin. That we are working with. They have to, we're working with them on the conservation easements. So they will have between 5 and 10-year conservation easements, basically preservation, that they have to maintain, preserve their building for at least the next 5 to 10 years, depending on how much money they accepted. So we're currently going through that process. All of the environmental reviews are complete except for 206 to 210 East High, which is the old JCPenney building. But basically, we're in the phase right before they can start procuring to do their work. The next Historic Preservation Fund grant for design guidelines. This is actually going to be the contract for the consultant will be on the consent agenda on Monday night's meeting. We also have a West Main Phase 2 architectural survey. This will likely not be on Monday night's meeting. There's been a little bit of issue with the contract negotiation with the vendor. So it's a little bit of update since I submitted my report. State CDBG CV, the Cole County EMS station. The environmental review record has been completed. We've also completed our 15-day public comment period. It is now with the State of Missouri Department of Economic Development. They also have to do a 15-day public comment period. At that point, they'll issue an authority to use grant funds, which is essentially a notice to proceed. So we should start seeing activity across the street for the EMS facility within the next few months. Also, with our other state CDBG CV projects, we are currently working with Transformational Housing, who's also in their environmental review process. Very similar, just a tad behind the EMS facility. Same type of deal. They have to go enter into an MOA with the State Historic Preservation Office because they're replacing windows and doors. So we're going through that process. Once that's complete, we'll enter into the public comment period. The state will enter into their public comment period, and then that project will also be issued its authority to use grant funds. The Community Revitalization Grant Program, we did learn that we received the grant. It's a little over $2.1 million. We're leveraging the EDA grant as match. That project is specifically for revitalizing the neighborhood, and we really selected the redevelopment around MSP because when we're looking at it, it's easy to get siloed and look at it as just that redevelopment project. But what you're really trying to do is you're trying to invest in that community to make sure that that investment starts spinning off other investments. So we chose the MSP area because it's a qualified census tract. So it's qualified census tract 207. We are demoing some of the structures in MSP, including Housing Unit 5, the Saddle Tree Factory, the corridor that connects Housing Unit 1 to Housing Unit 5. We did build in demolition of the wall into that grant application, though the conversations about what sections remain and what will be demolished are still ongoing. We can also put up steel fencing with this, and then also that infrastructure that connects to the neighborhood, crosswalks, lighting, anything that's kind of above surface sidewalks, that sort of thing. So that's what that funding will go through. We still have 2 pending applications that are out. We are waiting to hear back from the Mid-Missouri Solid Waste Management District. We did apply for a $25,000 grant to go ahead and refurbish the remaining 3 glass recycling bins, get them painted. The next step for that is once they kind of get that base purple paint, we're going to start partnering with the local schools and have more, kind of an art contest about recycling so we can open up education funds to be used to maintain the recycling bins. So they're probably looking at kind of some public art on the recycling bins. Department, also we're waiting on Department of Economic Development, American Rescue Plan for the local tourism asset development grant. That was supposed to provide hotel gap financing for development at MSP. And we should be hearing very soon about that one. And that's really the updates. There's always more things that we're looking at. We did something I didn't put on the report, but that we're going to be working on. We are a block grant recipient for the Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant Program. We have to apply by April 28th. There's actually a webinar this afternoon that we'll be participating in. It'll be about $76,000, and it will likely be an energy conservation planning document. The bipartisan infrastructure law, we think about it in relation to hard infrastructure, but it also included a lot of energy funding. So those programs are just starting to roll out. So we want to make sure that we have a planning document in place. That way we can go after the larger pots of money. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Could I just ask you to go to the page you're on, just to the top, just for the benefit of the 2 future council members, administration. One thing I wanted you to point out is that a lot of the things you do, you're able to bring dollars to the city to help offset our costs through monies coming to fund activities that you do. If you could just kind of explain what that line item means.
Sure. Just for the administration component.
Yes.
Okay. So a lot, not all funding, but a lot of the federal funds that come through allow you to take a percentage or a chunk of that funding for administration costs. And we use that predominantly for staff time. And so with our CDBG, it's 20% of our total allocation. With community revitalization, it's going to be about 80, it's 4%. So it's like 84,000. But we use that to pay for our staff salaries, including fringe. So what that enables us to do is when we go after these federal dollars, we're able to shift what would normally be staff being funded from the general fund over to the Fed. So it leaves our staff funding available to go back into the general fund for you to program elsewhere. And it's that happens with admin. So over the course of 3 years, we've been able to shift back probably about between 400,000 and 500,000 back over to the general fund just by shifting our staff salaries over. And we could keep going with that. I do need a little bit of general fund to fund staff activities because we do things that aren't grant funded. So those activities, the work has to go back, has to be tied back to that particular grant. And we do trash and recycling and things like that. So we still need a little bit, but we don't have to tap into a larger funding mechanism to be able to provide the service that we're providing.
Yeah, I just want to get that out. In addition to being very talented and finding dollars to help us do things, we all know federal dollars, if some of them, most of them come with strings. So I think Ms. Senzi does a great job of finding ones that help us meet needs in our community and bring in dollars to fund the activities. So thanks for going through that.
Sure.
Any questions? All right, for those trying to watch from home, we'll try to get back on schedule now. I appreciate you going first. I didn't mean to catch you off guard, but appreciate.
I just needed the mouse. We're good.
There you go. Thank you. All right, we are going to get back on schedule. We're going to go to item number 3, business. And number 1 under that, I've got to check in on a call, so I'm going to turn the meeting over to our Vice Chair, Councilman Kimna, and I will be back.
Yep. So I believe Britt Smith, or actually Mr. Bangy, you're going to take this one?
Yes, the Highway 54 discussion.
Oh, 54, I'm sorry, I jumped to parking, but yes, US 54.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so not a ton of new information in that regard. The last time we were together, the committee was interested in having a little bit more information concerning some of the public comment that MoDOT had received concerning the options that were presented at the January public meeting that was held here in this room. So we reached out to MoDOT, and although we haven't received anything formally from them in writing, we did have the opportunity of hearing a presentation given by Randy Albers concerning that public comment. And he basically indicated to the group that was at the meeting that everyone was pretty universally opposed to what was shown as option one, which was the removal of the ramp from W onto westbound 54. And that opinion was generally split between what was shown as options 2 and 3. So option 2 was the use of 4th Street to kind of make a ramp back to the highway. And then the option 3 was, similar in nature, except it would have its own dedicated loop ramp that comes back. And so he basically indicated that, those were equally received kind of an equal support from the people who commented. Sort of, where we are at the current moment is, we're running kind of short on time probably. MoDOT has still indicated that they intend to work on the project in 2024, which is a year from now. And so certainly there's going to be need time to actually design the project and the permitting and everything else that's required for that. So certainly time is of the essence. Since I wrote the memo, I did have a chance to talk with James Beatty, who is the project manager at MoDOT for the project. And he was asking us for information concerning what might be some property restrictions in the area there by 4th Street. So, by that question, it would seem as if MoDOT is still exploring what might need to happen in order to do options 2 or 3. And at the same time, acknowledge that that permitting might be an issue and might actually slow the project in some manner. So that's kind of where we are and what we have to report. Again, not a ton of new information, but we wanted to bring that back to the committee. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
And it's my understanding, I don't know if it was the last meeting or the previous meeting, we endorsed, I don't have it in front of me, but we endorsed project 3. Is that?
Right. I think there wasn't a formal action taken, but I think the majority of the committee voiced their support of option 3.
So do we need to take more action related to that to confirm that that's what we prefer or not?
Well, if you wanted to, as the council wanted to endorse one or the other, you could. The last couple meetings, we've kind of been waiting and seeing what MoDOT was coming up with. So if you felt strongly about endorsing one, the committee could move some kind of resolution to the council to say, yeah, we want you to pursue this as a MoDOT, or you could not. We don't normally comment that directly on MoDOT projects, really. So, but we wanted to, initially, we did do a resolution saying, definitely don't want you to remove the ramp, that's for sure. So that just said, hey, we want some access there is what it basically said.
Yeah, it's my understanding that there will be a meeting this coming week between MoDOT and I think it's Representative Schulte. And James seemed to indicate that, after that meeting that there would be some decision that MoDOT would be making. So that seems to be kind of in next week's plan, but.
And I don't know what yeah. Go.
Option 3. Well, for option 3 for the city council. That's the one you decided on option 3, and that's what they're going to discuss on. You said that next meeting.
I don't actually know what they're going to be discussing precisely, but it seemed as if a decision was going to be forthcoming after that meeting of next week. We don't know what option MoDOT is leaning towards at this point.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to do anything as a committee, I think, unless you're very strongly as a council feel, it's only this one or nothing. But, yeah, I think you've already spoken in my mind, so.
Yeah, and I agree. And I know MoDOT hasn't made a decision, so I know it'd probably be tough for us to really make an endorsement and especially, like I said earlier, with kind of the changeover. And I know some of the incoming have been paying attention. So I think it'd be pretty easy for them to be quickly kind of brought into the loop as far as what direction we've been going as a committee. So I think at this point, we'll probably steer clear of making any kind of endorsement now.
And I'd be more curious to see what the results are from the meeting with Mr. Schulte and MoDOT. So maybe there'll be some clear definition of what will happen there. So thank you.
So, and as always, I appreciate just, informational, how things are progressing here. So any other questions on the staff on item 1 of the agenda? Okay, seeing none, moving on to item 2, parking. Have Britt Smith.
Yes, we have 3 items under parking. The first item A, I'm not sure we need to have much discussion further beyond that than we had this morning. So I'll move on to option B, item B, 100 block of Madison. As the committee is aware, we've received some concern in reference to the change in rate and time limit in the 100 block of Madison Street. That's the block in front of the, the Governor's Mansion, and also in front of the Cole County Historical Society. With the recent change, the current time limit there is no time limit in that block, and the rate is set at $1 an hour for parking. And then the violation rate, if you have an expired meter, the fine is $30, which is calculated to be what it costs to feed the meter all day long plus a $20 fine. So that's where it's $10 for feeding it for a 10-hour day, which is the length of the enforcement day, plus $20 fine. So the concern has been with both the fine and the rate. Previous to the change, the area was a 4-hour parking zone, 4-hour metered parking zone, which, it was never parked full then. And honestly, since changing to $1 an hour, it's not parked full now. It's just a block that many people, I think, just don't think about. Given its proximity, it's good quality parking. If the committee were to want to make a change in reference to the concerns that have been voiced, it would be staff's recommendation that we go back to a 4-hour time limit if you choose to make a change. Again, I'm not saying we're advocating for that, but go back to the 4-hour time limit. But we would set the rate at 50 cents an hour, which we think is more in line with the market given the proximity of where that is located. And obviously the committee can do nothing. I mean, it's, but if you do choose to make a change, it would be a recommendation to bring something forward to the city council.
I think we do need to make a change. And did you look at or think about doing it as like 90-minute parking like downtown?
I would not recommend that at all. It just, where it is 90 minutes, I think would be too short a time frame, given that you're, other than the Historical Society, if you were going to go downtown and parking there or to the Capitol, it just would not be conducive for that kind of activity, which is what that block seems to be used for.
Go ahead.
Has there been any thought? I mean, can there be special tags made for organizations or staff of like the Governor's Mansion and Cole County Historical Society, to where they could purchase a tag that would kind of exclude them from the current structure that's there now?
Certainly the council could enact something to do that, but we don't have currently a vehicle that would allow it.
I think the Historical Society folks do have some parking.
Yeah, the Historical Society does have some private parking
Staff
of their,
people.
for their staff. It's their volunteers, docents that seem to be the biggest concern. And I would point out that, with the app, they, if they do need to extend, they can certainly do that from inside at, the Historical Society without going back out. And if we were to do the 4-hour, that would be available to them as well. But just, it really comes down to what the council wishes to do. We've been hesitant to make any special arrangements because where do you draw the line of who gets one and who doesn't?
I would be willing to make a recommendation upon staff's recommendation that we bring that to the full council for their input for the 4-hour flip back to the 4-hour.
And I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any other comments?
Just to clarify, would that also include the 50 cents an hour rate?
Correct. Excuse me, that was your full recommendation, correct? Oh, okay.
And we would also change the violation
The
rate,
violations would automatically change with that.
match it.
So we have clarification on the motion then.
As staff interprets the motion is to change to recommend to the council that we change the time limit back to 4 hours with a 50 cent an hour rate and associated violations for that type of zone.
You're good with that?
That is my
Okay.
recommendation.
Second, you're good with that? All right. So any other comments on that? Seeing none, I guess roll call or all in favor? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none? All right, ayes have it.
All right, so then the final item, I'm sorry, I should have handed this out earlier. Item C is parking rate adjustments. As you know, we've talked about this, previously. Regardless of what action we need to take at the garage, whether it be rehab, whether it be reconstruction, we strongly believe that a rate adjustment, at least initially, is needed. Staff actually made that recommendation during the budgeting process. What I'm passing out to you now is what staff's recommendation is for our rate structure over a 7-year period, and then ultimately, adjustments over time after that. It would be 10% adjustment into the rates for the first 2 years, and then a 7% adjustment after that. Certainly up to the council as to if they would like to, endorse the entire schedule or simply a 1 year or none. But on the second page of what I passed, the first page actually outlines what those rates would actually equate to in dollars for each of our charges. The second page, I just took the opportunity. The last time we had a rate increase was in 2005. I Googled the CPI for each year for the Midwest and then applied that to those rates from back in 2005. So if we'd made intermediate adjustments over the years, you can see what the rates would currently be. And I think if you compare these two, they're not significantly different as we move forward. Unfortunately, we did not adjust those rates since 2005, and we are, I think, woefully behind. So it would be staff's recommendation that this committee endorse the rate increase, be it either the 1 year and we revisit it, or the full schedule. Leave that to the committee's purview for that discussion. Be happy to answer any questions.
And do we have any questions? So you're looking for action to be moved from this group to the full council, either for the first year, several years, whatever, just moving.
That's
based
correct.
off of this, yeah. Have any desire to take action on this today?
For incoming new council members, I think it would kind of help them if we would endorse this to push it to the full council, because we've had this discussion. And I think it kind of helped them to not be so burdened with some of this information. So being that it was based on our review of the current council. So I'd like to see this pushed to the full council review to have
As a full slate?
as a full slate.
Got a motion and a second. Any other comments?
Can you tell me who seconded that?
Mr. Schreiber. Motion and second. Seeing no other comments. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Mr. Smith, for that. Next on the agenda is item number 4, MSP Chestnut Street Extension. Mr. Bangy.
Number 3.
Oh, I'm sorry. So, I'm sorry, overlay and street ratings. I'm sorry, Britt Smith.
Okay, my timed out. Grant, can you re-click that link for me? Just close that and go back to the Word document. All right. As the council may remember, we contracted with and partnered with some professors from the University of Missouri in Columbia in reference to our street rating systems. This is the output of that that process. This is I'm going to put it kind of to the cutting edge of technology, using artificial intelligence and video to capture what they actually do is drive each of our roads and take a picture. A picture is pulled off every 5 meters as they go down the street. They then use a computer through artificial intelligence to evaluate the types of distresses shown in each of those pictures and individually rate each picture. It is truly it takes all the subjective nature out of the rating system by having the trained computer do the rating systems for it. Apologize for kind of geeking out. I kind of get excited about pavement rating, but as you can see, the dashboard up above shows rating. Obviously, if we're pointing right to the green, heading to yellow. Pavement rating, again, the PCI, pavement condition index, is from a scale of 0 to 100. When you get to 70, it's kind of like school. You're not as good as you were, and you're getting into the C range. But then you fall below that, you're in the D range, and then finally, you're in the fail range. And that's the green, yellow, and red. You'll notice here it's showing a 74 that's kind of marked as solid. When we did our rating about 4 or 5 years ago with Anderson Engineering, that was what our overall condition rating of all our streets were. And you can see, over the past 5 years, our rating has declined. So we can drill down and, use this as a tool, drill down and look at individual streets. We can look at individual distresses across the city. It's an extremely valuable tool and provided to us given that our partnership with in the research project at relatively low cost. So wanted to just update the committee. First off, this is the tool that we use to determine our overlay list. Do I have any questions in reference to this portion of it? And I'll move into what we have actually used this for.
I think the main takeaway was we had, albeit 2 different rating systems, they're somewhat akin to one another, but our rating did decline fairly significantly over the 5 years or 4 years, whatever it was. So when people do have comments about the streets condition, the rating system does support that.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Smith on the rating system?
All right, if we have no question on the rating system itself, Grant, could you give me the other map? So as the committee is aware, each year we put together a program based on our surface maintenance program. Currently in the sales tax, there is $1.385 million dedicated each year to that program. Unfortunately, over the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen significant increases in our cost to do this, to deliver this service. As an example, we were paying less than $80 a ton a couple of 3 years ago. This past year, we paid $104 a ton. So that's obviously a very significant increase. And we've been told to expect it either stay similar to that or increase. We've heard numbers as high as $120 to $125 a ton. But the county's recent experience in bidding leads us to believe that maybe it'll be a little closer to flat, but we have our fingers crossed on that. So obviously that's still an unknown. But we're certainly expecting it to be in excess of $100 a ton for the overlay program, which is the bulk of the work that we do. So staff started preparing our list this year, and it was a pretty short list. In talking with Councilman Fitzwater and Councilman Spencer, the idea of increasing the funding for this program was raised, and the possibility of using the remaining funds in sales tax G, which is approximately $1.6 million. Staff develop a plan where if we use half of that this year and half of that the following year, to take a look at what the program is. So in your packets, as a part of our program, we had developed the overall plan with that additional $800,000 in the first year. And then we show you on that first sheet, the yellow, we show you all the roads that could be done given that dollar amount, we believe, with our current estimates. But if we were to remain at the $1.385 million, those that are highlighted in yellow and crossed out would have to be removed to meet that budget. And certainly staff's recommendation, or the Public Works' recommendation, I should say, that we get as many streets done as we possibly can. Obviously, we could spend every dollar that you give us, and we understand there's all competing priorities across the city. What is shown on the map on the screen are where we would be working with a full budget of the additional $800,000 the first year, with the streets done in red. Those in red would be done this year. We did not spend much time developing year 2 and year 3 plan that we typically do, because we just don't know what the budget looks like until we spoke with you guys. If the council were to endorse whichever direction this committee and the council endorses, we would adjust our plan accordingly for future years, and we'll bring that back to the committee for your review. Be happy to answer any questions, but staff is asking for the committee's recommendation, and we'll take that forward to the council.
Tag on to that a little bit, already sitting on the council agenda is the supplemental of those gleaning funds to the overlay program for the 1.6 million. So just from timing standpoint, has check mark on it for the first meeting of the next council to approve, that would implement this plan. Now, if that doesn't happen, of course, then we have to fall back and remove the yellow things highlighted in yellow. So,
Councilman Spencer.
Just for, for question or clarification, what would we have the capacity, would we have the time in the calendar year if we went ahead and didn't split the sales tax G gleaning funds to a 2-year time period, but go ahead and just roll it into this year's work?
That would be difficult from the standpoint of, the prep work that needs to take place on each one of those roads. What we have been doing is, when we develop this 3-year plan, the reason is not only for you to get a look at what 3 years looks like, it also gives our staff the ability to go out and make any repairs that need to be made to that road that we're planning for next year. We have done that work or in progress of finishing up that work. if we were to throw another 800,000 at it this year, at this point, it would be difficult for us to get that prep work done in time for the overlay.
Thank you for that.
Now, that doesn't mean that we couldn't slide another 100,000 of that and do, 900 and 600 or something like that.
I would just encourage if we could do something to that effect, because we don't know what those costs are going to be for the product the following year.
I wish I had a crystal ball.
I know. So, I think the potential is greater of saving dollars, for the long term by doing as much as we can now. So
I definitely had some streets that are on the bubble that I would have liked to go ahead and slid into this year, but I was trying to stick to that 800,000 at least at this point.
And really, as the year moves along, things happen, good or bad. And so if we can get caught up with and do a few extra, we might try to do that and then come back, perhaps make sure our contractor is willing to do a change order. Last year, they were not. And slide that in at the end if we can do another street or two, but we can leave that hanging for now and not overpromise here too much.
Comment?
So my understanding is the 1.385 for street overlay and similar was based on the 5 million. So I know in council we agreed that really that we would have more money coming in through sales tax, and that for half cent it'd be more like 6.375. If we went with that, looking at what you had for percentage for street overlay and associated, you'd have 450,000 more in this 1.385. So my first question is, why aren't we budgeting more out of H for streets?
All that's certainly possible. And that usually I think occurs in the budget process of what you set the sales tax at. If it's going to be more than our original budgets, then all the various divisions, is that going to be equally distributed again, or, that decision, I'm not sure has been made. And that would, I think, typically happen during the budget process. And certainly could.
We went through the budget process, and that's what we decided. But
Well, I don't recall that personally. I don't know if anyone else does, but what finance does is they look at that 5-year program and say, okay, there's so much going into the police category, fire, whatever, public safety, public works, and these various pools. Now, if we're going to increase those, that'd be great, of course. Until then, it sets in a fund balance, or leaning, whatever you want to call it.
okay, well, I would say that we should look at that. That's my recollection of our budgeting, that we agreed that that we'd have consistency across the different funds, and that would actually be expecting more than the 5 million. But also, I certainly think we need to put more into streets and overlay. I do have serious concerns about putting so much of from G into that, because we know we have many other needs, and we know from the safety tax, because we needed to, we put most of that money into salaries, which is appropriate and needed, but that leaves very little for other needs within public safety. But I know also in other public works, we have plenty of needs. I just would be reluctant to put all this into streets, although I do agree we need to put a significant amount.
Well, I'll make one other comment. If you look at the rating system in these budgets, one of our things was we know how much pavement we have, especially it gets more, the number gets better all the time, more of these rating programs we do. But one of our goals was to say, really, you know, if you look at a life cycle of that, can we increase that mileage of what we're doing, lane mileage of streets being overlaid every year by about, we need, starting the number now, we need about another 10 miles to kind of keep up, we feel like, and that 800 to a million-ish was that sweet spot, we think. Of course, we got to get the prep work done, but that would get us back to where we were several years ago of lane miles being overlaid each year. And that, I think, you know, that number directly seems to directly tail with public opinion and feedback we get about, hey, my street's in bad condition, and that when we were up there a little higher mileage, we got a lot less complaint about that than we're currently getting now. So.
And I think your comment is very valid, and I think that was part of the caution that we got from staff. Instead of spending it all right away, do it in halves. And then we've got some, and, you know, basically, if they don't have the money, they're not going to do projects, even though it's set aside. So we can meet some of the needs, as Mr. Marash just indicated, from the public, but we still have half of it if something comes up that we absolutely, I mean, we've got it identified for streets, but we can readjust if we need to.
I think I could go with the 1 year and a half, but not more than that. And I do think we have more money that we could allocate from just H.
And yeah, I think that's a valid question. You know, it's kind of a Sheila question that we can verify. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to follow up, you know, after knocking on over 1,000 doors for running for reelection here, the public was pretty clear about, you know, they really want their streets and infrastructure really having a focus. And that's why I think we really tried to do that with this proposal. So I think we're just trying to meet the expectations of the taxpayer and what their voices have been saying, that they want their roads and taken care of. So I think we're fulfilling that obligation.
You'll need to come to the microphone. Just identify yourself.
I'm Jeff Allers. I'm the newly elected for First Ward. I just had a couple questions, Ron. I was just sitting there listening. That sales tax G, that money that's left over, was there any projects promised underneath that didn't get done, that money should be allocated for?
We tried to go back and look at, you know, I think we felt comfortable that what we were proposing was the overall general discussion for those funds.
Okay. And then
So, I mean, we felt comfortable that we were expending them
okay.
in a way that the community was supportive of.
And I'd say my hearing's a little not as good. Brett, you said the stuff yellow, if that was not highlighted in yellow, that half of G those would move off the yellow list and that would be done then? Is that what I heard right?
You know, the list that was shown is if we have the 800,000, the full list, including those highlighted in yellow, would be done. If we're on the original budget, only those that are not highlighted would be complete. And then those that are highlighted would be pushed down to future years.
How, and you have all the prep work done for, if you got the okay for the rest, let's say 800,000, you have the prep work done and then it's ready to go?
We're confident that it will be ready to go by the time we get this bid.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you, guys.
The comments, there is a request for an action item. Make sure we get all the.
I mean, you want to make the motion?
Feel free, and I'll second it. I
Okay.
think we're on the
Go.
same page there.
Yeah, so we'll make a motion to move that forward with the proposed 800,000 out of sales tax sheet.
So what'll happen is we'll bid that project with that additional lane miles in there. And then that will project, assuming then the bill passes for the supplemental at the next meeting, we'll move that, when we get that bid back, it'll come right to the council to be approved.
Great, thanks. Seeing no other comments, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Thank you, Councilman, for running the meeting for me. Takes us to item 4, exciting project MSP / Chestnut Street. Mr. Bangy?
Yes.
So the work on MSP is beginning to, at least for the street extension for Chestnut, is beginning to, kind of coalesce. As we're all aware, the state is working on the One Health Lab on the eastern side of the street. And we have things in the works with someone who's looking to develop an office building on our side of the street on the western side. And so with those things kind of in place, we're beginning to look at what the extension of Chestnut Street might look like. And so what you see on the screen and on your iPads is slightly different since some new information kind of came in at the last moment. But what you see basically is a 30-foot wide street pavement is what is being proposed. And so that would be basically provide for two 12.5-foot lanes, driving lanes, with excluding the curb and gutter, which are very generous in their width. Typically, a driving lane on a city street is 11 feet by our standards. But giving that extra width would allow, if there happened to be a vehicle that was stalled or standing at the curb, two-way traffic could still pass by on the opposite side of that vehicle. And so that's kind of the reason for the choice. But then also on the cross-section, you'll see that we are providing a sidewalk on the what would be the state side, so it would be the right-hand side of the picture. And then on the opposite side, the left-hand side, we'd be looking at what would be referred to as a side path, but basically a greenway with sidewalk on the left-hand side. And so some of the things that are still kind of in question, as Rachel alluded to, there's discussions of the wall. And so in this image, what you see is an idea of creating some sort of columns that represent where the wall was, and those perhaps could be integrated with some sort of lighting or otherwise. It seems like the conversations are going in the realm that there would be some desire to continue to have a delineation of where that wall would be. And so you can see in the image on the screen that we are showing like a 90-foot right of way, whereas on your iPads it's 80. And typically, or what we're showing or trying to capture there is basically capture the wall in the right of way itself. And so the city would ultimately control whatever would happen there. And also in this section, you can kind of see the positioning of where we're proposing the utilities to go: water lines, gas lines, phone, electric, fiber optics. And so this would be what would be extended basically from the current health lab down to the end of the wall. At this moment, we're not entirely for sure what the end of the street will look like, whether that would be cul-de-sac or just terminate into a future parking lot. But as for the length of the street, essentially, this is the cross-section that we are proposing.
And then just to kind of pick up on that a little bit, I had some traded some emails, and Ryan and I have discussed that as we're producing, we have our consultant here, CMPS, Paul Sampson, and I see Eric Landwehr's here as well. This city county project money. The couple things is the association did not want the wall or that wall area as part of their lot. So that's why we changed that width a little bit there. So that we could control that, and to get buildable lots instead of kind of a spite strip, you're really supposed to be facing right of way. So that just helps us with our planning processes, even though you might access off a little stub or something, not directly on the street, the parking lot I'm talking about. So that's a little nuance there. The other important aspect of this is the providing utilities to these lots. So they're basically buildable lots like a developer would do in some commercial subdivision, essentially. And so you can see the corridor David outlined there. But that's one of the next pretty quick steps we need to have is go back out to our utility group and start gathering their input on what do they need for a water line. They're going to decide that. The electric company's going to decide what kind of line ultimately they're going to bring up there based on potential uses, things like that. But we got to get their processes in order so those extensions can be planned for. What else on this one? Did I get the additional highlights there? You notice it doesn't include parking. There's been some questions about the state wanting some parking on this road. This road's very similar, would be, we look at it like Mission Drive, Cavalier Drive, the one in front of the hospital out there. It's very much similar in width, so you get a kind of feel in your head of what that is. And, you know, all these buildings do have their own parking lots, so having a way that, you know, that we don't anticipate any residential like you might find on Capitol where there's mixed use and that kind of thing directly on those old streets. So that's why it kind of looks like similar new development that we've had elsewhere in the city.
Well, just to tag on to that, the associations did indicate an interest in having street parking there, especially if they put some retail in their building. So are we comfortable that they're going to be happy with this?
Well, that's why I did reach out to Megan, I believe is her name.
Megan?
Yeah, and kind of getting them engaged. I think they're looking to perhaps contract with CNPS when they finally do get going. The orientation of their building would say that they're probably not going to have it directly onto that street. It'll probably be more the other direction from what their layout looks like now. But just depends on how that goes. There's additional parking also could be off the little stub that goes in front. Their building's orientated to the front of it would be facing south, if you kind of Jefferson City South anyway, you know, towards Capitol. And so just having those extra cars out on the street would probably not be a good idea, quite frankly, in this scenario with these large buildings like this.
Councilman Spencer?
Yeah, I just don't want us to short sight ourselves of any potential uses. I mean, I could see the potential of having a pretty cool car show down that street, and you know, old vehicles being parked there, and I think it would be kind of a nice added feature. So I just, you know, if we could add the infrastructure while we're doing it. I mean, it's not to say we have to have it, but at least it's already, you know, designed and capable of handling something like that. So that's just my concern. Thank you.
What we've done in other cases, you know, we plan the main corridor this way, but there's always potential if a site comes along and they have maybe some drop off area. There's, you know, we call them bump outs essentially that come back to the street, little circle drives if there's room for it, depending on how their site lays out. So that's always a possibility too.
Councilman Schreiber?
I think that the parking is a plus along the street there. And then another issue I'd like to bring up since we're on MSP. Some of you, of course, are aware that we did a tour of the MSP last Friday. And as we move forward along Chestnut Street with our partners, the state and the county, I think it's very important that we go ahead and get that razor wire removed as soon as possible. That is, you know, as people have a tendency and contractors and everything wander around maybe outside their original parameters, and certainly on the backside where the wire is down on the ground on our property. As we well know, that's extremely dangerous, and we saw that. So, you know, it's access where the wall was laid over by the tornado down there. It's very easy, and there's young people that go down through there and everything else. So as soon as we can get the razor wire removed. And I did do a little checking with some of our engineering staff when we installed a great deal of that at the old prison before we moved. And the best way to do it is not with the gloves, not with the chainmail gloves. The best way to do it is with a picker. And particularly because ours is all jumbled up down there from the tornado. So a picker on a machine like a backhoe or something is the best way to handle that razor wire. So I just think it's something we need to be concerned about. Probably the sooner the better. So thank you.
But it sounds like the group doesn't like this particular cross section. They want to see additional parking pavement there. So we we'd have to cut out some of those amenities, of course, for that. But I just want to be clear on what we're doing here before we go too far. That's why we talk about these things.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
One other concern that I have is, and this is reflected in the agreement with the associations. So in the agreement with the associations, we talk about the development of a communal parking infrastructure on the MSP site proper, where, you know, you don't have a bunch of businesses that each have their separate parking, build a facility that, you know, kind of the whole area can use, whether that's surface lots, garage, or something in between. And in order to develop something like that, likely there will need to be some sort of charge for parking, especially in a garage environment. So my concern with on-street parking is essentially we're setting up a situation where we have facilities on street that are competing with parking facilities on site that charge. And so really the way you would have to do that is to meter that street. Otherwise you have free parking sitting next to free parking or paid parking. No one would ever use the paid parking unless forced to. And so that kind of breaks down your revenue models on how you pay for the structured parking or the communal parking. And so my concern is what does it take to add an additional street of metering and the enforcement that goes along with that? I think that solution helps out a little bit with the introduction of the app, where maybe you don't actually have to use physical meters, but you can do parking zones, but still someone has to enforce that. And so, you know, ultimately up to the city council to make the decision. You know, we'll implement whatever you guys decide, but that is something that I would have concerns about is you know, if you do a parking situation that does require revenues to help it get it constructed and to operate it, how does that relationship with the street parking affect the, you know, the revenues that are needed to pay for the internal parking? So for whatever that's worth, that's something that I have been concerned with. And then additionally, in speaking to the state on this matter is, you know, they are one of the people that had expressed some interest in having on-street parking. And you know, what I conveyed to them was, well, if you guys are interested in having on-street parking, then, you know, my suggestion is that there could be a dedication of right of way out of the state's portion to get that constructed, and could be constructed as part of the overall development of the health lab project. And so having a little bit of partnership to get that paid for, and not have to cut so drastically into the amenities that we're trying to build in kind of what is really a first-class street here. So for whatever that's worth, those are, just want to give you the benefit of some of my thoughts on the matter and conversations that I had on this topic, specifically on street parking. So
We were thinking about getting one of the parking vehicles and having Councilman Schreiber just kind of police that section.
We have one, the emergency brake doesn't work very good on. We can
He's going toward the river.
Just
The river will
get out
stop him.
and coast off on him.
I think he wants the title Chief of Parking. So
Well, I guess we have muddied it. Councilman, did you have a comment?
Just, this is fairly minor for this, but it's more general question. I know, when the consultant for active transportation did the walk around tours, pointed out that our pedestrian cutouts, kind of are not what is recommended. And so my question is, with the pedestrian cutouts for this, are they going to be, so they go straight across the street at the intersection where there's a right angle going to each street rather than,
Right.
and have we changed our standard for cutouts, for pedestrian cutouts?
Well, if the world was flat, certainly our standards would provide for crosswalks or, you know, cutouts that would go directly 90 degrees to the
Right.
street. And in this instance, we, at the intersection with Chestnut and Capitol, it is relatively flat there. And so we could probably do a pretty good job of that. The problem is that in many cases with the slopes of the streets, if we build ramps that are 90 degrees to the cross street, then typically the slope of the crosswalk is, exceeds the limit. So basically, we'd have to try to keep those at a 2% cross slope. The street is running, typically at could be running at a 5 or a 10%. And so we sometimes angle the crosswalks into the corners to try to provide for a better cross slope for that crosswalk. So it's a trade-off, but certainly we understand that folks who are sight impaired or otherwise, having a ramp that is 90 degrees to the cross street does really help them in their direction finding. And so we try to do that whenever we can. But sometimes the ADA cross slope issues also come into play with that.
Thank you. I think you answered it.
I don't know, did you get what you were looking for?
This was our recommendation to proceed in this fashion. It sounded like there was a fair amount of people who didn't like this one. They'd rather see additional pavement out there. If that, I think, group clarity on that would be good.
I see Mr. Sampson here. I certainly don't want to throw you into the fray unless you're comfortable. Do you have any comments that might help either side on the discussion, or you just basically do what we ask when we make up our mind?
Paul, you'll need to go to the mic.
I'm sorry.
Whenever the state initially brought up the on-street parking, and I think to Councilman Spencer's comment, you get one chance to do this right the first time. So my initial thought was that we probably needed to have some on-street parking. But I think Ryan's comment as far as, how that's metered and how that competes with a potential future paid parking situation, I think would be something that would need to be addressed. But to me, it's maybe a cheap interim solution to have the on-street parking. The more parking you have on the street, the less you have to have off the street. So, as parking becomes an issue, and especially in the early stages when we've got the health lab and the association there before anything else really gets going, parking, I think, is going to be an issue, and having some potential for on-street parking seems to be beneficial. But like I said, there are some issues with that. And, it does, when you look at the 90-foot right of way, if we put on-street parking in, we'd probably be adding 16 feet. So we're at 30 feet now. You could probably add 7 for each side.
We just have to go back and look at it, I think, instead of trying to do
I don't
it
know,
here.
Dave,
But
what's our typical parking on both sides, like on Capitol Avenue? I guess that's got bike lanes on it, but
It would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 48 to 50 feet
that's
wide.
kind of what I was thinking.
yeah, it's a lot of pavement. The other thing is that I think about is, we sit here and argue about parking garages already downtown. And this is a newer style development, I guess I would say. But it's going to have the same state employees in different buildings. And we currently chase them about on the streets with our parking attendants, and not just state employees, everyone, whoever's down there. And so that's the issue. We're trying to avoid the extra pavement to maintain. And then secondly, the congestion that goes along with that, and trying to have a walking amenity. We even talked about, just for an example of this, hopefully someday there'll be a hotel or something up there on the top. And how do we get those people and, the conferences in this association, or if you just like anywhere, you got a big group of people walking from where they're staying to where they're going to go to their meetings and things, and just having that less congested on the street level, let better landscaping, make it look better. It can certainly have parking, but it just adds more congestion to that. People opening doors, getting in and out. We'll need to monitor it in some fashion, probably eventually. And just every time we move away from downtown where it's more compact and trying to add parking regulations, if we add some here, well, they're going to end up parking in the neighborhood a block away. all day, just things like that, encouraging people to use their parking lots with, just like in downtown. So it's kind of a trade-off. It can be done, but that's why when we put our heads together, we'd recommend just going with more amenities of landscaping, walkability, things like that. So.
Is it awkward to put parking on one side and not the other?
Not necessarily. I think we've got that situation on Lafayette Street. When the federal courthouse went in, we did that Lafayette Street extension, and the courthouse people were adamant that they did not want parking on the courthouse side. So we do have parking on the MSP side on Lafayette Street, not on the federal courthouse side.
Yeah, and that was a security issue at the
Right.
time, and I'm surprised these labs don't have the same comment once they get going, but because they always do come back to their security on these facilities, and to get in the current lab, the new lab, you kind of go in a little door, you check in, they have to have a tour guide, et cetera, and obviously in the federal courthouse side, they didn't want anybody parked around them really. And we kind of fought them to get it on the other side of the street, quite frankly, because of the tours and whatnot. So anyway.
Thank you.
I guess the long and the short of it is there's probably not a right or wrong answer.
No.
It's just
Our recommendation.
Yeah.
If you did parking on the street, does that kind of force the issue on building a turnaround at the end? I mean, don't you really have to have a turnaround if you're,
We're trying
Otherwise,
to get
people
away
use the
from
driveway.
those in this scenario because it's basically terminating in a parking lot instead of having like a cul-de-sac you'd see in a normal subdivision where we have these large parking areas and buildings. We're hopeful that people will use the parking lots, and it's not undoable, but yeah, if you just have random parking, you might need a little better turnaround. You got to get turned around somehow if you're parking on the street. So yeah, we'll have to rethink that a little bit.
Well, I thought it was important we have the discussion. I think
Yeah.
you've laid out a good case of what you presented. I don't feel strong enough that I want to hold up the project, but certainly the committee can weigh in if you think we need to send staff in a different direction. If not, I'm comfortable with proceeding. It looks like a beautiful rendering of what you're proposing there. So I'm comfortable that we've debated it, but if someone else wants to counter that.
And as we go through with the site planning, when we get the actual site plan, architects, engineers on board, there'll be more discussion about it, but we wanted to kind of lay out, especially the utility corridor for now, and just kind of get our budgets in line, thinking, okay, here's where we're going. We're going to need this much for road, but we're going to need this much for utility. We're going to need this much for that wall affair, and street lighting is always important. Those are very expensive lights, style lights, and when you have these nice amenities. So all of it's budget related too. So I feel like if we start here, we could always change as we go and bring in additional partners, as Ryan points out, if people are feel strongly about it from the state standpoint of the building, maybe they can pay a little extra for the width of their street.
Councilman Spencer.
Just in closing on it though, I just, we've got those foundational partners that are going to that location. And I think, that there's a little courtesy in that, and that, addressing their needs. I mean, they're the ones that are going to be there for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So, having those discussions and the collaboration, I think is very important. So I'm not swayed either way. I just as long as those discussions are being had and the wishes and their concerns are being addressed, that's all I can really ask. So thank you.
Councilman Schreiber.
I like the design. I already told David that I certainly like the lighting design and all of that as well. In regard to Matt's comment a while ago, regardless of how we go with this, that street's going to end down there toward the railroad tracks. And so you're going to have people that are going to be driving through there. They may not have any business with the state whatsoever. So they're going to be driving down to the end, and they're going to have to get turned around anyway. So that's going to have to be taken into consideration. because either they're gonna go on the railroad property and turn around, which the railroad's not gonna like, or whatever. So we are going to have to address that issue, whether there's parking on that street or not. But the overall concept and design that David, I told him the other day, I like it. I like what he's done. I like his incorporation of some of the stone. We talked about the towers at every end. We're still gonna try to delineate the perimeter, where the perimeter was on the prison. Certainly, this lighting is much more attractive than the high mast box lighting that we ended up having to place by the federal courthouse. So this fits in a lot more with the historical nature of the project. So thank you for all the work that you've done.
And I would point out too, on those towers, we're trying to coordinate with the structural engineer to kind of look at those. We anticipate if those do have to stay in place, a lot of rebuilding going on of those. This is just dry stacked stone, basically. And the standard for that, is at the time was non-existent essentially. So the wall's already fallen down a couple times in a couple locations anyway, or blown over. So to keep those as part of a development where we're attracting lots of people, that ends up coming to pass, that will be some additional money has to be put in for that. So we're more to come on that, but just to tee that up for you a little bit. But we're really trying to get going here, and I've been reaching out to the various architects and various folks to, hey, we want your input, and the sooner the better, because we got to get these utilities on task. That's a very important aspect that people overlook a lot of times. So you can't have a building if you don't have electricity and gas and water and all that stuff. So,
And I think your point's very valid. Having lived on a street that used to be dead end, people think the dead end sign is just a suggestion. It's not really going to stop until they get to it. And they start looking for driveways.
and on that point, we're thinking we don't really know what's going on there yet. And so, we're going to probably take this, Paul already left, we're going to take this street down to a point and probably, as a phase one almost to get these buildings going. And then kind of see what we end up with down there. If that's an entrance to a parking garage, that's one thing. If it's entrance to just a building, okay, that's probably a little different, and so not predetermining exactly what that's going to be just yet either. So.
Anything else? I feel comfortable you've done your due diligence and responded to the questions I had. So I don't see any reason to hold it up unless seeing nodding heads in agreement. So, all right. But you don't need any other action, just kind of a suggestion from us. So, okay. Back to Ms. Senshi. She moved on me. Landmark Award for 1431 Greenberry. You have a lengthy document in your packet on this one.
Okay. We did receive a landmark award application for the property at 1431 Greenberry Road. It is also known as the Dewey House. We received that application on January 30th, 2023. The Historic Preservation Commission found that the nomination met eligibility criteria 1 through 9, which is outlined in section 8-44. Up on your screen is the location of 1431 Greenberry Road. So if you're familiar with the area, it's between the McHenry House and the Nacy House. And when we're talking about eligibility, I'm not going to read through all of these, but we have 9 eligibility criteria listed in section 8-44, and this property met all 9 of them. Especially criteria number 5, with its identification as a work of a master builder, designer, architect, or landscape architect whose individual work has influenced the development of the community, county, state, or nation. This property was designed, the architect was Frank Miller. And Frank Miller designed a lot of the structures that you see around Jefferson City today. including the neighboring McHenry House and Nacy House. Is actually one of the reasons why your packet was so lengthy is the Frank Miller National Register Historic District just became enacted about a year ago. So here's the other properties that Frank Miller has designed, including the old St. Mary's building, the Temple Bethel, the St. Peter's School, the Carnegie Library, some of the more prominent homes along West Main, the Central Bank Building, the Carpenters Building, and the Cole County Courthouse. So this architect is Jefferson City. Even though he did both commercial and residential, the Historic Preservation Commission unanimously supported the recommendation for approval of 1431 Greenberry Road to be listed as a local historic landmark. Along with the main structure that you see from the street, there's also two contributing structures, including an old dairy barn that is on the back of the property, as well as the garden shed. So it was the recommendation of the Historic Preservation Commission to go ahead and move this through the process. If this body moves it on to full council, it'll have to be enacted by ordinance. So it is staff recommendation that this body approve moving this nomination to council. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments? Anybody feel comfortable with an action item? Councilman Schreiber?
I spent many a night in that house when General L.B. Adams lived there. He was a state adjutant general. And Mrs. Adams was the secretary to Governor Warren Hearns. And one time, I'm sorry to say, we almost burnt the barn down at a Halloween party at that house. So I feel very comfortable in the.
It's not
nominating.
surprising.
Yeah, yeah.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any other comments? Thanks for all your work on this. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Takes us to item 4. Are there any comments from the community? Mr. Landwehr, thanks for joining us.
Been here so long.
I could have put you up with Ms. Senzi. I didn't know you were gonna. Thank you.
Since I've been here so long, I'll give you an update on the multimodal transload rail
Perfect.
facility. I think Councilman Fitzwater, that we bid the project last month. We awarded it 2 weeks ago, I think, to Don Schneider's Excavating. It came in at about 4.3 million. We have to add a little more work due to the process to get UP to approve everything. It's a long, drawn out process to do that. But anyway, so it's going. Notice to proceed is going to be May 1st. If you remember, we had roughly $2.3 million in grant funding towards that project. With the bid coming in what it is and the city county cooperative funds going towards it, there still is some money that needs to be found for the project. The county commission has committed to whatever additional funds needs to be, but we're going after more grants. We can go after more from the current grants that we have. And then, as I understand it, there could very well be a line item in the state budget for additional funds as well. So things are looking very good. Everything's kind of tracking. It's been a long, drawn out process, a lot of hurdles to jump through the process. But the team that we have put together on it has been fantastic, and things are looking good for the future for the project. Capital Oil Terminals, they're in the process of getting ready to bid their project as well, and that'll be constructed simultaneously. So everything's coming into place. I just wanted to give you a quick update on that. So I know we've presented to this body before. So I just thought since I'm here, might as well say something. So any questions about that project?
Well, I just appreciate all the work that you've done on it. I mean, that you brought a vision to the community and all of a sudden it's reality. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. I can't take all the credit because the team and they left. Paul Sampson, Luke Holt Schneider, a group of people from Capital as well as Midmill RPC has been instrumental to make it. So it's been a group effort and it's going to stay that way till it's done. So thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Mr. Constellas, welcome. Oh, this is a short one for us.
Okay, that's your problem. Anyway, what I'm here about is I found out recently the Public Works has plans to put a sidewalk from South Ridge to Plymouth Rock along Beath Drive. And they got to get, there's three properties there involved. One is owned by, I believe it's the Department of Conservation. And then and then there's the Public Water District, which already has a sidewalk in. And then mine, and then my neighbors. And my neighbor and I do not want a sidewalk in. That's our first. Number two, if we have to have one, since about 150 feet before mine, the sidewalk is against the curb. And once you get past me and my neighbor and go across Plymouth Rock, for the next 2 blocks, the sidewalk is against the curb. We'd like to keep the aesthetics the same and have the sidewalk against the curb, which means you guys are going to have to bypass city code on that, which has it set back. And that's what I'm here for, let you guys know our concerns, our preferences. And number 3 for staff over there is looking at taking out about a 16 by 20 slab off of my driveway. About 3 years ago, I had that seal coated. So after they're done, I've already contacted the company. I don't have a price back for that size of an area yet. I'm just waiting to hear. So you guys, once I know that, I'll pass with that on if the project goes on. Just letting you guys know my concerns.
Okay. Well,
My neighbors are at work, so they couldn't be here.
I appreciate you coming. I don't know that we have a response now. Have you talked to staff about it at all
No, I
yet?
just heard about this the other day, and this is the
Okay.
first meeting to get to. I mean,
That's fine.
somebody did come out, John Fitch came out and talked to us, but I need to get on record somewhere, so.
Okay. Well, we can start there. Mr. Bangy,
Yeah, we have John Fitch, one of my employees, was out talking with Mr. Costales the other day. And so he came back and was voicing some of your concerns to me. So, and a couple things, the sidewalk, the reason that we want to put the sidewalk there to start with is that we want to take advantage of the fact that the water district did actually put in sidewalks. And so they own a frontage of several hundred feet. And they did put in sidewalks when they did their redevelopment a couple of years ago. And so, as Glenn indicated, there are just 3 properties that separate the sidewalk from continuing all the way from Rock Ridge over to the school, to Cedar Hill School. And so there's a number of young students who walk that path to get to school every morning. And so certainly having a sidewalk there we think is important, and certainly would take advantage of the fact that we required the water district to put in sidewalk of their own. So it closes a gap and makes that sidewalk make a whole lot more sense along that stretch of road. And so that's the reason that we would like to pursue that generally. In terms of the location of the sidewalk, I have a couple pictures here on the screen that are sort of reasons that we typically wouldn't put a sidewalk, currently wouldn't put a sidewalk behind the curb in a residential area. And so this is actually taken, Beath Drive turns into Satinwood. And so this is just down the street from where we're talking about. And so you can see in the picture, that with residential properties, there are mailboxes. And so if you put the sidewalk right behind the curb, then ultimately you end up with a mailbox right in the middle of the sidewalk. And so certainly from an ADA standpoint, that's not acceptable anymore. And so that creates a difficulty. Again, same sort of issue, mailboxes. In this case, there's a light pole right behind it. And so the space is rather limited. And then certainly you can see the drive approach there above the black mailbox. And so that's not ADA compliant. And so having that sidewalk run through there, again, is an issue, and particularly as we look at building new sidewalks. Again, having sidewalks right behind the curb, typically then people don't have any room to put their trash cans out. And so you end up with trash cans sitting on the sidewalk. Again, an ADA issue. Certainly we wouldn't expect someone to park in a driving lane all day, but we seem to accept having trash cans on the sidewalk all day. So there's some disconnect there in terms of the uses of those facilities. And so obviously if we leave a space behind the curb, then someone could locate their trash can there and not block the sidewalk. Additionally, in a residential area, having that green space between The curb and the sidewalk allows a place for the snow to go. So we're asking residents, who have sidewalks to shovel their sidewalks. And so having the green space allows somewhere from the snow plows to reside and not be piled up directly onto the sidewalk. So that's another reason that we typically would have a green space. And then, another reason ultimately would be, at least rooms for street signs and other things that we might need along the street. So those are kind of the reasons. And ultimately, the council approved our standard, which would have the 3-foot green space with the approval of the standard drawings back in 2020. And so we would, unless there's some particular reason why we can't, generally that's from topography reasons, that in a residential area, we would certainly have an offset from the back of the curb to the sidewalk.
Okay, well, we appreciate you.
I just came here to make my concerns and I go with whatever decision is made, so.
Okay. Councilman Spencer?
And I guess, to kind of share a little bit of what Mr. Casals brought up, I mean, we're talking about 2 houses that would be impacted by the new standard, but then the rest of the street isn't necessarily to that new standard. So it just doesn't make sense to me to have to force the new standard onto just 2 residents there. I mean, is there any room for maybe saying, could we go a little wider sidewalk instead of,
Certainly, it could happen that way. The standard would be that if it is against the back of the curb, that it would be 6 feet wide as opposed to being 5 feet wide. So there is some additional cost for the actual construction of the sidewalk since there's more concrete there.
but then that goes back, I mean, the cost eventually reverts back to the homeowner.
No, I mean, we're
because they
going
have
to
maintain it.
Well, to maintain it, correct, yes.
So that means if there's chunks missing and they're not just gonna.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
And the other, and kind of going along with that is that in terms of future maintenance, if the sidewalk is right behind the curb, then the sidewalk and the curb sort of go together from then on. And so if the curb is in bad shape, you can't just fix the sidewalk and leave the curb undone. You really have to fix the curb and fix the sidewalk. And so by providing a green space between the two, you actually sort of divorce them from each other and can work on them independently. And so that is an issue, particularly, I mean, that we have that all over town, unfortunately. And so that's a lot of the cost of rehabilitation of the sidewalk is the rehabilitation of the street curb, because the two things are tied together physically. And so, so in terms of cost and future maintenance costs, those things are real.
But there's not I mean, we could have a 6-inch green space, from the separation, or even a, expansion joint space between. I'm not advocating to pour the sidewalk right up against the curb either. I'm just saying, we could use a little bit of discretion there.
Right. And you certainly can. That the 3-foot space, the reason that that's been chosen is the distance or the length of a typical residential drive approach. And so if you've moved it back 3 feet, then from an ADA standpoint, you're behind the ramp. And so that's one of the reasons. And another part of that is, if that strip gets too narrow, typically there's a real difficulty in getting grass to grow there, probably from the heat of the concrete and other effects that would probably prevent be able to maintain grass between that space.
Just put some AstroTurf down.
Yeah.
Use it as putting green.
Yeah, sure.
So what is the status of this project?
We would intend to be under construction by the middle of the summer.
So if there was going to be a suggestion to do something different, you'd need something from this committee?
Yes, if we want to go down a different path, now would be, I mean, we can certainly delay the project, but, knowing sooner than later would allow us to, to move forward or in whatever direction you would like us to go.
And I assume if there's a grade to the apron up to the driveway, that complicates the sidewalk being like the picture you showed where you had to kind of mold it down to.
Right. And so, you know, if the sidewalk, in this instance, if the sidewalk were to be behind the curb, we would look to basically bump the sidewalk out and around the drive approach. That we probably, strictly from an ADA standpoint, we would need to make the wings of that drive approach larger in order to accommodate that. But we might, we've typically not done much of that simply because usually the running slope of the street sort of cancels that out. But I mean, there are ways, and we have, you know, different alternatives within the standards to try to address some of those more difficult issues.
But ultimately, we can't design and construct in violation of ADA. I mean, that's a baseline. So it's a series of new problems if the design changes. But just I wanted to make sure that's off the table. We can't do anything that would violate ADA in this type of new construction environment. So.
Okay, it looks like someone online had their hand up. Did you have a question? It's not? Okay, so I guess there's any other action at this point then, Councilman?
So would there be, if that sidewalk was pushed closer to the curb line, is there ADA issues regarding that?
Well, we would have to we'd have to make sure that we bumped it out around behind the drive approach. And so in terms of the effects on the driveway, they would actually be more, or at least as severe as they are currently with the current design. We'd have to make sure that we bumped out around, you know, the mailboxes. But I mean, otherwise, yes, we could achieve compliance, I believe, with it against the curb. It just makes there'd be these other additional bump outs to get around these other items. And then again, it goes back to, you know, where did the trash cans get placed, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and again, I just want to be clear. I mean, you know, if this was just an isolated area that, you know, they would be the start of a sidewalk system, then I'd say, yeah, we need to go with the existing standard. But we're flowing into an already existing design, and to have an immediate impact for two houses, I think is just a little severe.
Right. So with the Loggy Ridge subdivision, which is on the opposite side of the street, there were sidewalks constructed with that project, and they have the 3-foot separation. And so in some ways it would look similar to the sidewalks that are on the opposite side of the street directly across from Mr. Casales's house.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing that. I mean, it sounds like we'll have a little bit more discussion, but the window's closing very quickly, so. All right. We've already taken care of, well,
I don't know that we have any specific plan as of yet. If we go back to the cross section, we had an area that's about 15 feet wide between the back of the with the greenway and the wall that we were looking to landscape in some fashion. I don't know that we have that completely defined as of yet. And in some ways that probably it rests on what exactly happens with the wall. You know, if the wall were to, there's been kind of a discussion of the wall, does it completely disappear? Is there kind of a short stem wall that gets built? And so depending on the answer to that question, it may be that the greenway pulls away from the street a little bit more, and the sort of the landscaping area moves between the curb and the pedestrian way. But in any case, we are planning for there to be a landscaped area in some fashion, on the city side of the street.
And that's just streetscape, but.
Right.
As buildings develop, there's all the city landscape requirements for parking areas and all those kind of things that'll have to be dealt with as any site plan. There's probably some additional on some of these connecting walkways through the site that we've been talking about that are, not typical stuff, almost parkway-like for pedestrians. And so just as things go, we have to come up with those standards, but we're a little premature on that right now.
It looks like the additional comment is, I see that there are swales, but as a member of the Environmental Quality Commission, I would like to see native landscaping added to this plan.
And I know we've had conversations in the past as far as stormwater retention and using native to help assist with that. And I don't know if maybe that's part of the inclusion as we develop this project.
Right. And I think certainly some of those things can be integrated into that. We just haven't gotten into that part of it yet and certainly we look into that and probably we need to look at who or develop how we'll maintain these things into the future. And so I don't know that those questions have been completely answered yet. But certainly having landscaping that is native is certainly the trend and certainly would be something that we would try to follow.
And we probably didn't cover that very well when we talked about, there was kind of a swell shown over there, but the idea is that we would try to provide some additional stormwater features, water quality features in that area. We haven't decided exactly, but that depending on how these buildings go in and their retention and things like that, maybe we could mitigate that for some of these sites with our project. We initially showed some underground stuff down at the end. That tends to get pretty expensive, so we were hoping maybe to pull back on that part of it and do it in these swale areas. And we're all trying to get this water down to one smaller pipe that goes under the railroad tracks and get the water through there. So as these things are built, we'll have to keep all that in mind as well. We certainly do that.
Okay, we appreciate the comments and the questions. I guess I would take it offline to Mr. Bangy if you have additional comments. I mean, there's still a lot of decisions to be made, but we appreciate you raising those issues. Anything else to come before the committee?
Mr. Chair, just very quickly. So I've been informed that up on Capitol Avenue, demolition of all the buildings that the city was going to undertake is complete. A little bit of picking up some concrete surface pieces is left, but the contractor is in the process of seeding and strawing most of those sites. So Mr. Bangy, Mr. Helmick's still around, but I've been told that is substantially closing in to complete. So a little bittersweet, to lose the buildings, but also an improvement to the streetscape, at least in my opinion. And then also the old church on Monroe Street between the municipal court and the police, that's getting lined up for demolition. But I'm very happy that we were able to enter into agreement with Historic City of Jefferson to do some salvage in that building. And I believe they undertook a lot of that last week. I saw some trucks backed up and a lot of stuff coming out of there. And Mr. Landwehr was involved in that. So we appreciate his efforts and the efforts of Historic City Jefferson to save some of those elements. Hopefully they go back into the communities for some really cool projects. So we're really happy about that. But I think the actual demo work on that will start here in the next couple of weeks as well. But just kind of want to give an update on those two projects that have had some pretty significant progress just in the last few days. So that's all I have.
Thank you very much. All right, one action item left.
Well, real quick.
Councilman
Before we motion to adjourn, I just wanted to make a comment. As I know a couple of us, our council comes to an end, and I know you move into the new role, so I know this is going to take on a new look next month, but I just wanted to show my appreciation for working with you guys on this committee and my appreciation for staff and all the years that we've worked together on it. And I know we're in good hands moving forward. He laughed, but I know we're in good hands. But I just wanted to just go on record and show my appreciation to everyone that has been involved with this committee and all the members of this committee as well. So
Good, thanks.
And good luck
Thanks for
with-
your service.
yeah, good luck with.
Oh, it's been good working with you.
Yeah.
All right,
Move to adjourn.
thank you, sir. We are adjourned.
Thank you.